I grew up a Christian and remained one for most of my life. One of the major turning points for me was the fact that I have had a long and difficult journey in this world, beginning at the age of 5, when my mother left me and never returned. My father could barely manage his own life, so offered me very little in the means of support or guidance, and he later died as an alcoholic, homeless man. He did, however, indoctrinate me with a manic passion for Jesus. Initially, a difficult life drew me much closer to God as I prayed more passionately and probably more frequently than my peers. However, after a lifetime of struggle, due to many circumstances out of my control, my consistent praying eventually began to etch against my beliefs. After looking back on all of the time I have spent on my knees, I began to wonder if I had been pleading to nobody out there. After I began to seriously question, where is God in my life? I decided to look for him. As a result, today, I am no longer a Christian, and for a large number of reasons, which I cover in this 16-video series. In this video 13, I will be taking a very close look at prayer. In 2005, Duke University began Mantra, which was a 3-year study and clinical trial to see if people being prayed for had advantages to those who did not receive any prayer. The conclusion was that the patients receiving prayer had no significant improvement over those not receiving prayer. Another one of these studies, named STEP, in 2006, was performed by Harvard with Professor Herbert Benson, who concluded, some prayed-for patients fared worse than those who did not receive prayers. Folks, real people with honest intentions to find out the truth have embarked on the mystery of prayer, and the overwhelming result for anyone who would dig deeper is that prayer offers no realistic or verifiable help, and there really is no debate on this subject. If we make frequent visits to a children's hospital, we will discover for ourselves how Christian families have no better survival or recovery rates from that of non-Christian families. In fact, if Christian prayers were actually effective, or even slightly provided an advantage over illness or blessings in life, we would all be Christian. It is also very important that we understand the fundamental nature of prayer, such as prayer only works when there is a possibility for coincidence. It's kind of like how a psychic will throw out letters and ask, does anybody know somebody whose name starts with a T? It's a hit and miss process. If you pray enough times, eventually you will find something to convince yourself prayer has worked in your life. But once you remove any possibility for coincidence, prayer fails every single time. For example, Christians will never pray over an amputee because in this situation, there is a 0 chance for a coincidence. Only things that have a probability to occur naturally or organically will be prayed for. But if a Christian God is real and all-powerful, then why not pray over an amputee, the blind, or the deaf? Why does Jesus never heal a burn victim's face or repair the spine of a paraplegic? There should be no difference for God whether he heals terminal cancer or restores a missing limb, such as a finger or an eye. But these kinds of prayers would require that the God you are praying to is actually real and powerful. Believers will not pray for such things because it's too uncomfortable or awkward having to admit such acts are impossible for their God. It is much easier to maintain a religious faith if you just don't pray for anything that lacks a natural possibility. Just like the psychic who fishes for a catch, prayer becomes a game where you eventually are likely to get a hit. If the outcome you happen to pray for comes to pass, you can now use this as evidence that God is working in your life. And if your prayer isn't answered, well, God knows what's best for you. Believers have therefore fabricated for themselves a win-win situation. Very convenient. Of course, there will always be a few believers who will attempt to argue in defense of some great miracle. They have personally seen the power of God. They may have even read about it in a book, or even seen it on YouTube or TV. Maybe they attended a faith healing service and watched a woman step out of her wheelchair. The ironic thing is, these miracles actually embarrass most rationally minded believers. Most of us can spot a charlatan when we see one. I've seen a pastor on YouTube who can walk on air. But do I really need to refute any of these claims? No, because they are always a take my word for it testimony. If we are being intellectually honest, we should think that such miracle powers and amazing faith healers would be doing work in hospitals where they are desperately needed. But no, it is always on a church stage somewhere, with no tangible evidence ever offered. Should we just take their word for it? Absolutely not. And I will tell you why. It might be painful to acknowledge for some, but the truth is, nobody lies or embellishes miracles as much as religious people do. Non-religious people simply don't have the same incentive to make up miracle stories around the power of prayer. I just so happen to have personal experience with this fact, and I bet so do most of you. My father was very religious, and I know with a certainty that he oftentimes embellished or even outright fabricated miracle stories in an attempt to convince others Christianity is true, and I think even to convince himself a little. It's sales. I remember he told me a story about how he and my younger brother had ran over the family lapdog with a large van. She was crushed under the weight of the wheel and laid there dying. My father and little brother put their hands on her and prayed. Soon after, she was up and running around like nothing happened. It was an absolutely true and powerful miracle from God. At least that's what I had believed for many years. This incredible miracle was food for my faith. I even repeated this story to a few people in my attempts to wow them with the power of being a Christian. But many years later, after my father had passed away, my little brother had begun to express doubts with Christianity. After all, he came from the same struggles as I did. He brought this story up and told me that it wasn't really a miracle, and that she hadn't been badly injured. He had felt funny for lying and going along with our father on this story. But he was too young to throw up any protest. My father had embellished the entire incident. It turns out that the wheel only flanked her and made her yelp. Of course, they did think they drove over her, and were extremely worried, and did say a prayer. But the truth is, no damage. In fact, there wasn't even a scratch. There was no laying on of hands and no miracle prayer. I know from my own personal experience how many religious folks are desperate to embellish these kinds of miracle stories, and some will do this compulsively. After all, their books are filled from beginning to end with magic and miracles. Miracles are very synonymous and organic to religion. This alone should be enough to make everybody skeptical. Any time you open up a holy book and read a magical tale, this should be a red flag. It seems so silly. They certainly do not mirror reality as we know it, nor do they ever carry even a slightest bit of evidence. Ironically, they have even given it a name. They call it faith. Another obvious problem concerning the power of prayer is how it never favors any one particular religious group. In fact, every incompatible and opposing religion to Christianity will likewise claim their prayers are effective and tout miracles. We should expect that if only one religion is the truth, there would be a monopoly or a realistic and verifiable effectiveness in miracles among the group that worships a real God. This is not what we find in reality. But according to the Bible, it should be, and should be overwhelmingly obvious. In the book of John we read, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also. And greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. And whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son." The Bible is saying right here that the effectiveness of prayer should be overwhelmingly obvious so that God will be glorified. It continues and says, "If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it." Surely it would seem crazy to believe anyone could match the magical abilities of Jesus, much less surpass them. But right here in this passage, the Bible promises that any Christian can, or even perform better ones. This promise has no tricks, no loopholes, or qualifications attached to it. None of the apologetic excuses used by believers are applicable, such as, "but only if your faith is great enough." Such excuses are brought forth only because this promise is verifiably false. If the Christian God were to be real, he appears to be candidly dishonest or misleading at best concerning the power of prayer. During the mythological times when John was written, maybe false promises were not such a big problem. However, in our modern era, we expect a deeper level of honesty and reliability. I have come to realize through my own experiences, and from what I have seen in the world at large, that Christians cannot perform miracles at all. They cannot heal the sick, raise the dead, calm hurricanes, or perform magic like walking on water. These exist only within the pages of Bronze Age religious books. Christian prayers, like all other religious prayers, appear to be nothing more than silent chants bouncing off walls or lightly disturbing the air. However passionate they might be, however many times they invoke the name of Jesus, they produce no verifiable effect in our world, outside of an occasional coincidence. Regardless, in moments of desperation, or when a believer is down on their luck, prayer will become more frequent, perhaps even manic. You can see this play out on social media almost daily. Believers will often have a family member, friend, or themselves being critically ill. And I do not mean to come across as uncaring. I do and always offer my sympathy, and I never blame them for trying to reach out to a superior being for help. Essentially, you will find them asking for everybody to participate, to get involved by sharing a prayer post, believing that if they can invoke a large enough number of prayers, or tally up enough people to raise up their voices, then God will be more inclined to help. Does anybody ever connect the dots on what this really says about God? If you are sick or desperately in need, should not your prayer alone be sufficient? If God is more inclined to help you based on a higher number of prayers, or if he requires a certain amount of signatures on a ballot before acting on your behalf, this is a God not worthy of admiration. Such a manic effort to increase the number of prayers should not be necessary if prayer were in any sense sincere, loving, or logical. That being said, I will wrap this video up by saying I don't necessarily think we should not pray, or that prayer is a bad thing. Good energy is good energy, and saying a prayer over dinner while holding hands, or praying for somebody who's ill, or even asking others to pray for you, is essentially giving or asking for positivity, or having a thankful heart. This can be a positive practice no matter what religion you belong to. Sometimes positivity and hopefulness can assist in recovery or depression. Prayer can be good. However, if you are very sick or know somebody who is, do not fail to seek proper help or visit a hospital. Never become so delusional to where you believe prayer will fix you. This could be a fatal choice. Prayers, positive thoughts, or well wishes are typically not enough to help get things done. The only superpower that we have in this world is what we can accomplish through our own hands-on efforts. Madeleine Murray O'Hair so wisely said, "2 hands working can do more than 1,000 clasped in prayer." During my faithful years as a Christian, it truly baffled my mind how so many people didn't believe in the power of God acting in our lives. Now it baffles my mind how so many do. I have had to admit to myself how there is no evidence of a God interacting supernaturally in my life or anybody else's. I was delusional. I used to believe that if I could just get one person to open the Bible and read it, then they would awaken to the truth, and how that Jesus healed a blind man and floated up into the clouds. But now I have come to realize how you most likely will need to be indoctrinated at a very young age by a trusted authority in order to believe in such stories. I used to believe that if I could just get one person to say a salvation prayer with me, that Jesus would perform his magical Holy Ghost thing, enter into them in a climactic emotional way, and transform their soul. But now, I have realized just how patently untrue and misleading all of this magical religious business truly is. Stay strong and wise, my friends.
I don't believe in masquerades. I don't believe that you're okay. I don't believe that God will save. Only you can solve your problems. I don't care what they sold you. They are not here to hold you.